or connection back to nature. Right. So how do you actually go ahead and photograph? So ranging from a full frame all the way to mirrorless, using various lenses, point and shoots, and even a simple, or rather, I wouldn't even say simple, the much nicely engineered smartphones of our times now. Me personally, I've gone ahead and stopped carrying a wide angle in most of my travels. Right. So what is actually photography? Right? How do you do it? So there is this whole delicate mix of technical and artistic know-how. So one is knowing how to do it, and then the second bit is how you apply it. So I always call how you do it in terms of technical and how much of shutter speed you use, what is the ISO, composition, exposure, and the field of view you choose. That remains a very artistic or a personal choice. Right. So some simple rules. I wouldn't say these are rules. These are rather guidelines. So some of the options which I said is the eye is pretty visual, right? This is our visual sense. So what this allows you is to take in all the sensory overload at times with the kind of information we have now. And you go through probably at I think a minimum of 200, 300 images in a day, any given photographer in today's day and age. But certain images capture your mind or hold your attention for slightly longer. So most of the times it will be either lighting or the kind of composition that your eye is drawn to. So one of the basic simple rules is this golden thing of rule of thirds. So where if you happen to place your image on any of these, so this can be like either the feet of a bird where it is starting and then you have an empty space around, or this could be an eye or the actual visual anchor of what you want the image to actually hold. Right. And then coming to the bottom bit, which is called the golden spiral. So this is again a Fibonacci of design, right from snails to millipedes, the way they roll up. So this again can be used as a very effective tool. Yeah, I think I saw someone join in. Can you please go ahead and mute your microphone and turn off video? Thank you. So on the chat, what's happening? Okay. Varsha says, please give an example of the golden spiral. Yeah. So this is exactly that. And this, though it does not really go ahead and follow the rule of thirds, the earlier one did. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry. Yeah, this was a perfect example of a rule of thirds, right? So this ideally would have been slightly higher here if it had to follow that, but I chose to place it between the two dots. Yeah. Thank you, Farouk. Yeah. So in this case, again, this doesn't really follow the rule of thirds. But in this case, what I used is I used the spiral, which goes around this way and then this. Uh, is is my mouse cursor visible?
No,
Yes. and shoot, it is not going to be white. It is going to be a 18% gray. So if you want it to turn white, you'll have to overexpose by how much? 18% at a minimum, right? And then as you go ahead and increase your exposure compensation, the image tends to get lighter based on where your metering is set. And as you turn negative, it turns darker. So this works in the PSA modes, not in the manual. In manual mode, you are using it, you are setting the exposure completely by yourself. And please note, this really doesn't work the best when you have auto ISO turned on. Yeah. So that's if you really are wanting to go ahead and just let me check. Anyone with questions? Can you share presentations and PPTs to us? All right. So that I think Creative Peripherals will send out a link with maybe the recording. So later. Yeah. All right. So this is exactly how you use exposure compensation in the programmable shutter speed or aperture modes. Right. And based on what you've chosen in terms of whether it was center weighted matrix or point metering, based on that, you can either overexpose or underexpose the image. Right. So moving on to the next. So again, this is a quick thing. I'll probably not dwell too much time. This is a topic by itself. So the exposure is defined by three different things. One is how sensitive your sensor is to the amount of light. So that is given as your base ISO, right? And then based on your, so you can fix ISO. You can then, once you've fixed ISO, you can probably go ahead and try changing any of these three to make your exposure different. So one is in terms of aperture, right? So aperture sort of defines the amount of light that you're getting in from the lens, right? So if you notice, all of the lenses would have some kind of a reading. So in this case, right, you'd have something like this. So here, this one says it is a 3.5 to 5.6, right? Which means this lens at its maximum or widest aperture is a f3.5. And when you zoom in from 18 to 55 mm, at 55 mm, this is a variable thing. So it at 55 it changes its aperture to 5 enough to the amount of light and the needed aperture to capture enough of the subject in detail. So I cannot probably just go ahead and imagine I can shoot a spider's eyes at a given full magnification at f2.8. That's not going to happen. The depth of field or the splice of the area of focus is going to be extremely small. Just give me one moment. Okay, so Prasad had a question on.
Yeah, Hayat.
Yeah. So what, Prasad? So what we'll probably do is would be great if you could just note down the questions and keep it for later. Would that be okay? Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Right. Then coming to a very important bit, which is how you define a field of view. Right. So the human vision, I think, is somewhere around about 180 or slightly above that. So maybe about 220, I guess, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that though. So that's what the human vision is. So this is what we have is a fixed field of view. We can't change a field of view. But with lenses, you have the capability to do that, where you begin with wide. So this is probably going to be about 180. Don't take screenshots and make me look funny, please. All right. And as you keep changing your focal length, the image keeps getting narrower, right? So imagine you're looking at something with your bare eyes this way, and then you spot a bird in a distance. You go ahead and pick up your either a telescope or a binocular. What you're changing is your focal length. And with that changes your field of view. What you're seeing will be a very, very thin sliver of your whole field of view, but what you're interested in is that very specific little thing, right? So those are the kind of degrees of field of view, and that is why you'll need to use lenses which have varying focal lengths based on your need. Right. So what are the advantages of a mirrorless camera? So any one of you who would have attended yesterday's session by Olympus again would have had some insight into how DSLRs and everything else work. But for the ones who haven't, I'll probably still give you a very quick rundown. Right. So the way the thing works is you actually have a shutter, sorry, or rather a mirror which reflects whatever the lens is seeing. So the lens will probably be somewhere here where your vision's here. So it'll have an angle. So this reflects light off and then you see it within your viewfinder, right? So because of that, anybody who's done star trails or long exposures, one of the first things they do is they go ahead and enable mirror lockup. So this is done to reduce vibrations. So with a mirrorless camera, this sort of comes built in, right? And because there is no mirror mechanism, this allows a lot of things to go ahead and reduce the bulk of the full camera and the associated lens with it. So your whole system becomes a lot more lighter, becomes smaller as well. There is no mirror mechanism. Because of that, your frames per second, what you can capture, and along with electronic shutter, it can really go up to about 20 FPS. So that is getting almost close to what video is capable of. Right? So that brings in again high FPS capability, and because it is smaller, it is cheaper to build and support. Right? So what this gives you is, as an end customer, you get a lot of benefits, which I'll talk about in the next thing. But the first one, the benefit that you'll probably just go ahead and get is you get a much cheaper camera to run.
For me?
Right. Can everyone go on mute, please? Thank you. Yeah. And the other, I think for mirrorless, I think the greatest advantage I see as a creative photographer is the ability to have live preview, right? What you actually see in the thing, you don't have to second guess in terms of how your image is going to turn out. We'll talk about this in the next slide in detail. And you also have a electronic viewfinder, so where you are able to project whatever the images, the lens is gathering in terms of vision onto the viewfinder directly. So this has a lot of benefits. I'll talk about it in the next slide. Right. So the what is a micro four thirds standard, right? So we spoke about what was a mirrorless, right? So a mirrorless is where any system, if it doesn't have a mirror, that becomes a mirrorless automatically. So is your phone a mirrorless? It is. That doesn't use a mirror again, right? And coming to a sensor, that is what differentiates the micro four thirds from the others. So here, the green square or rectangle. I need to wake up. All right, so the green rectangle here is the probable comparative size of what a full frame or a 35 sensor is going to look like. Right, and then when it comes to this, so this has a lot of, because of the larger sensor, it allows various capabilities in terms of field of view is going to be low, your magnification factor is low, and you will be able to take much wider landscape images with equivalent lenses, like a 18 mm on a full frame is much wider than what we've seen on APS-C, right? And then comes to a slightly smaller, which is the APS-C, and this is the us shoot with if we have DSLRs. So this will have like a 1.3 to 1. Oops. All right, sorry. Audible now? I think I was temporarily muted.
Yeah, it's audible.
Sure, thanks. All right, so then comes the APS-C sensor, which is slightly smaller. It is up to about, gives you about 1.3 to 1.6. Okay, it gives you about 1.3 to 1.6 kind of magnification compared to a full frame sensor, right? Then comes to a thing of the micro four thirds, which is a 17 mm sensor, right? So this gives you a much so compared to the 35 mm, if you do a simple math, right? 35 divided by 17 is almost 2x. So you get a 2x gain in magnification. So this will probably give you how much of a benefit this gives you in the field, especially somebody who shoots wildlife or anything else. You with an equivalent lens. So like say for instance, a 200, if you have a 200 mm lens on a full frame body, you move on to a micro four thirds, and that becomes a 400 equivalent in terms of field of view, and your depth of field doesn't change. That's great. Right. So on the left here, we have a few manufacturers who've joined the consortium. So these are the ones who help define the standards and build systems related to this. So Olympus is one of them. So you also have Panasonic, Sigma, and others who make lenses. Yeah. So here's a quick comparison. So we're just talking about what thing, right? So on the left is a comparative image or a pretty visual image of what a full frame with a 600 mm4 would look like. And on the right, you have the same equivalent image with the same aperture on a micro four thirds lens. So the reduction in bulk is going to be great. And this is one of the primary reasons I moved from I didn't move. I also picked up a Olympus system along with my Canon. Sorry. Yeah. So again, with the increased reach comes the ability to magnify your image better. Right. So in terms of macro, the larger magnification you can get, the better you'd want to utilize it. Right. So this is how it's going to turn out. Right. So again, with mirrorless bodies, as well as with the Olympus system, it comes with a 5-axis in-body image stabilization. So we all know we end up paying quite an amount for lenses which have vibration reduction or vibration control, VC, VR, all of those. So with this, any lens that you slap onto this system inherently becomes image stabilized. So these are some examples of handheld images that were made. So on the left, so we have a mantis on a thing, and on the right, we have a rose ring parakeet, which was pretty cooperative. Yeah, right. So then comes to the next advantage. So we've always wanted precise focus, right, on things which we want to showcase that on. So the other things, as long as they don't are out of focus, we're fine. But what we want to showcase and display that in detail matters a great deal in terms of photography. So what we'll use is focus peaking. So in this case, all right, can we go a little easy on the arrows? Thanks. Yeah, thank you. So in terms of focus peaking, right? So when you're going ahead and using manual focus, right? Half of the time, you're depending on what you can see through the viewfinder and the aperture that the manual lens is dialed in at, right? So at times, if you use apertures like f8, f11, they tend to go slightly darker. And on the APS-C and slightly lower bodies, the viewfinder isn't the brightest. So on the left, I went ahead and used this feature called focus peaking, which enables, once you enable it and you are in manual focus mode, once you turn the focus ring or you go ahead and move the whole body in and out, what you'll actually see is this overlay of the color you can choose, red or yellow. I think there are a bunch of other colors as well. So using a color guideline, it actually shows what is the area in focus. And you're no longer second guessing. So you can't imagine the kind of precise focus that enables the shooter to bring in. All right, guys, I understand many of you are using the chat session for quite a bit of questions. Yes, we will probably give ourselves some time. So there are a bunch of, what do you say, myths, which we can go ahead and bust. Yeah, you can probably probably have a notepad or something, keep them aside, and then we'll take them at the end of it. Thank you. All right, so this image of a data, right, basking in this. So I saw this image through the normal camera system, went ahead and made an image, right? And then I figured so this overall image was pretty dark, right? And there was very little light, or a very light, the area which had anything greater than gray to dark was very small. So what I ended up with was a pretty overexposed image, right? So, and I thought, okay, fine, we'll go ahead and try with a -1, -2 kind of exposure. But then I am guessing, I'm actually shooting and then reviewing the image, saying how it is turning out. But with a live view and the electronic viewfinder, I was actually able to compose this in the field, and using the exposure compensation, I could actually visualize how this image is going to turn out before the actual image is taken. Right. So this is how I probably set it to spot metering on the bird's face, and then went maybe about -1 in terms of exposure compensation to bring this up. Yeah, star trails again. So we've always known bright lights are our enemy when it comes to long exposures. So we always go ahead and try long exposures on something which is very dim. But what live composite allows you to do is take multiple images of that, and it'll probably merge it with that particular exposure. You can read about it more. I'll probably not delve too much on this particular. Yeah. And then you also have some of the other features, including focus bracketing, right? So we'll probably see shortly how depth of field affects depth of field is affected at true macro ranges, how sliver thin we have in terms of depth of focus, and what we can do to change it. So in this case, if I were to probably take a image of my finger, right, if my depth of field is going to be just this, but I want the whole thing, what I can do is I can set up focus bracketing and set it to focus from here till all the way here. So the system will go ahead and keep changing focus from this way. And some of the systems also have a thing of bringing all of the images back as a single one, but some of them still go ahead and focus bracket. Then you can go ahead and what we call as stacking. You overlay all of those images on top of each other, and then you have a thing which has greater detail for a larger depth of field slab. Right. Last but not the least, again, many of these bodies are pretty weather sealed. So this again opens up great avenues to go ahead and shoot. So some of the images such as rainy frogs, that you can still go ahead and make. Right. So some images which I went ahead and made. So we'll probably just showcase this very quickly. So this again, preening data. And if you notice, pretty much most of the bird, right from the feather to the eyes, is in detail. And this, with a fairly small aperture as f6.3, I was able to manage because of the smaller sensor. Right. So again, here, a bunch of newly hatched Pentatomidae bugs. So use the aperture at about f8. to go ahead and get enough depth of field to capture all of these in detail. So here's a pretty amazing animal. This is called the gharial. This was shot in Chambal. And at the right distances, it also does give you a decent depth of field, and there's good amount of bokeh that's still seen. Right? And here's a monkey puzzle. I'm sure biologists have a lot of fun when they're naming these species. Yeah, and here's a Neoscona going ahead and devouring We'll answer that a little later. All right, so the question is, why macro? Right, so this is one of my favorite subjects, the most loved, and once it's a great source of fascination, right? So when it comes down to elephants or tigers or any other wildlife, not going at demeaning them, but how many do you see in a year? Probably one, probably two. If you are very regular at safaris, maybe that numbers might increase. But insects, things which are small to show in detail, you're surrounded by it. So macro will open up a great deal of avenues to what you can shoot. It will turn the mundane into extraordinary. Like they say, the devil is in the details, but actually the details is where the fascination really lies. So again, it brings in endless possibilities in terms of what you can shoot, what you can do. Right. So let's go ahead and bust some myths in terms of macro. Right. So one of them is people say, hey, it's a very right, not here. So it's, as you bring in it, just keep focusing on this, and please don't fall asleep. Right, and as you bring in, at some point is where the definition stops, right, and it begins to go out of focus. So whatever the point you saw the last thing was, that is called the minimum focusing distance, and that applies true for all lenses that are produced throughout the world. Right, and that is the base magnification. So we'll probably go ahead and see what we can do to change those in the coming slides. But at this time, so you have to just remember one thing. So each lens has a certain minimum focusing distance. So in terms of wide angle lenses, it could be as low as 1 feet. And some telephoto lenses, it can be as great as 12 feet. Right. So what we need for macro is a lens which can give you close focusing capability and gives you decent amount of magnification when compared to your sensor size, right? So we'll come to that. So finding subjects, all it takes is just a keen eye. That's that. There's not much beyond a keen eye. Once you actually get into macro photography, you'll actually wonder saying how you could be walking around without seeing so many subjects. Right? And then it goes ahead and really engages your creative vision. So you will start seeing things in very different light. I'll show you some examples a little while later. Yeah. So let's go ahead and see what are the tips to getting clear images, right? So first is try getting the right magnification in the field, right? So each lens, so imagine you go ahead and take a image of a flower or a insect in the field, right? But you're standing very far. You didn't get as close as possible to get the right magnification in, and then you start cropping, right? Everybody says, oh, mine is a 61 megapixel mobile phone, mine is a 30 plus megapixel DSLR. I'll still go ahead and shoot, and then I'll later crop. So what you're doing is you're losing pixels, and you're also losing definition, right? And there's also this thing where certain lenses get the right detail at the minimum focusing distances, right? So that is where you want to get the right magnification within the field and do not rely too much on cropping. But we do that as a practice, but try getting limiting that as much as possible, right? So then the next thing is choosing the optimum aperture based on magnification. So here I'll probably just let me just check on the chats. Sure. All right. Yeah. So we all know, right? So given let's pick this mobile phone as an example, right? So you've got this, sorry, right? So you've got this as a thing, right? So this is a certain magnification because the camera is, so the lens is fixed, right? As I change, what's happening? The magnification increases, right? For a given fixed focal length, as your subject to lens changes, the magnification increases. But there is a physics rule, optical physics rule, which governs the thing which is called the inverse square law, which says as you halve the distance between the subject and the lens, your depth of field will not half, it'll get quartered. So it's going to be 1/4 of what you would have got at that original position where you started from. Right? So as you increase your magnification, like say for instance, this is your camera plane, and here's where your subject is. You took a right because of the distance, but you ended up with a 1/4 of the depth of field, right? And hence, when you can get by having about close up, say about f4 or f5.6 at lower magnifications lesser than 1:2, but sensor. So if we have a 35 sensor, a full frame sensor, a 1:1 lens will give you 35 of, you can fill the frame with a 35 subject. But when you come to a micro four thirds, the same lens can give you how much? 2x, which is about, it can fill the frame with a 17 subject. Right? So that is how the magnification is really looked at. And if you also see, let me just bring this up. So here's my setup. So this is a Olympus OND EM10 and a true macro lens, right? So if you actually see, you guys are able to view this clearly enough, right? So you'll have these markings. This actually shows when I keep moving this, this will change, and this is a window to me telling what is the magnification the current body is at, the lens is at. So this can move from infinity to 1:1. At infinity, you can shoot as far as you need, but at 1:1, your minimum focusing distance is going to come in. and that is where the subject is going to be sharpest. All right. So then coming to thing, right? So when we are actually shooting at 1:1 and beyond, many long lens telephoto shooters would have seen why they use tripods, right? Because when you're hand holding it, your body literally turns into like a big spring-loaded machine, right? Where it's vibrating constantly. The same thing happens when you're shooting macro as well, right? So you'd want to maintain decent shutter speeds based on situation. So if you want to show wing blur and all of it, you can still use lower shutter speeds. But if you want a crisp image based on the amount of available light and your aperture that you're shooting, you'll need to maintain the shutter speed accordingly, right? And again, can everyone go on mute? Like we discussed about the exposure triangle earlier. Choosing the right ISO also matters, right? So what happens when we change ISO, right? So the sensor is receptive to more light, and that is caused by photons getting excited at that level, right? But what it also does, it brings in a very unwanted thing called noise, which means your pixels which are overlap are not will. So if you have, like, say for instance, these are two different pixels, right? So this is well defined, this is well defined at low base ISO. But as you increase that, right, so the definition is going to start merging. The pixels are going to start overlapping, and you'll have this more smudginess that will come in. So when you're shooting macro, you want to get the best details possible, and for that you have to have a low ISO as possible. And right, and then so coming to the other thing, which is practicing the sniper technique. So most snipers, they know they say they can shoot between heart. That is the kind of control they have, right? And but in the field, what we do not this and shoot too much. Want to use to ISO low to say 100 or 200, whatever is your base ISO. Locate a very interesting subject on the ground. Manage to get yourself very muddy, slushy, because you want to get eye level to the image, right? You put all of this effort, and your resulting image is going to look like this. This is not a technical glitch. This is how the image is going to turn out, right? Because if you do not understand what is the kind of exposure it is going to come up with, all of these have their own limitations, right? When you set a high shutter speed with a very low ISO, based on the amount of light you have available, the image might turn up like this, or maybe some detail showing somewhere, right? So actually, how do you go ahead and shoot an actual image? So let's make a very modified list of macro images list now, right? So pick the right lens based on magnification. That is macro lens to make an image, right? So again, you have to measure ambient light and set the right necessary shutter speed or ISO. You have to choose the right aperture and set ISO based on ambient light. And there's also this pretty amazing thing of using flash, which I'll probably cover in a little while. For now, we'll just focus on the amount of ambient light that exists, right? And then you go ahead and locate an interesting subject, use the right technique to approach, right? So you wouldn't want to go and get your lens into the dragonfly's face this way when all you want is the full dragonfly. So you have to know what is the kind of approach, study the subject a little if possible, right? Because getting consistent images in nature photography always will be resultant on how observant you are and how much of a mental note you can make and keep for approaching the subjects, right? And you also have to come up with a pre-visualization of how you'd want your final image to look like. It can change in the field, no doubt, but when you're approaching a subject, you start with probably low magnification, making record shots, and then going closer and closer as you. Right. So we just spoke of going ahead and using shutter speed, aperture, and how all of this goes through, right? So what are some of the challenges that we have? So one obviously is you're not going to find all of the subjects out in a meadow or a field, right? There might be subjects which are in under thick canopy or under shrubs. So the amount of light that you have available is going to be a thing. So second is finding cooperative subjects, right? We all love cooperative subjects. You'll get some great close-ups. You get to observe them very closely. I feel it's a very personal connection when you get very close and they get relaxed and you watch them either preening themselves or feeding, right? And what also matters is, especially with insects, is the time of day that you choose, right? So earlier in the morning or later in the evening are, I find, the best times to approach them, because given that they are cold-blooded, they wouldn't have really warmed up. And you also need to do your homework in terms of what are the kind of perches they prefer. So some of the dragonflies will uh, tend to keep coming back to the same perch over and over again, right? And they have their marked territories. So that also helps. So again, the next thing which is pretty important is we spoke of how the aperture changes. Sorry, the depth of field changes as we increase magnification. But there's this pretty solid optical physics thing which is called diffraction. So what it does is, so we can always say, right? So at lens goes from f2.82 all the way to f22. Why don't we just go ahead and set it f22 and I'll get an image which has decent enough depth of field? You might, but what happens after a certain point, right, like say about f16 or so, diffraction kicks in, where the image will tend to get softer after that, right? So most of the lenses have a certain sweet spot, so which is like generally say about two to maybe three stops larger than what their minimum is. So if it's like f2.8, say about f8 to f11 is where they might be the sharpest based on the kind of make. Right, and then again, you also have shooting angles, right? Some of them, some of the subjects might be like at ground level, or they might be behind a fence, where you might not be able to reach with the normal SLR with your uh, whole system being against your eye. But with a mirrorless body, you are able to put distance between you and your camera out. So if I'm here, I can still go ahead and put my hand out and still shoot this way. Right, so those are some of the things which you can use. So now let's probably put a little theory to this whole, let's put some practice to this whole theory. And once we are done with this, I'll probably just go ahead and have a image showcase as well. So in terms of how we break down how I made some of my images, right? So far, I'll probably give, say, about 2 to 3 minutes to ask any specific questions if we have in terms of the aperture, the magnification. Yeah. Farooq, I think you can go ahead and unmute for 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone with questions?
Whoever have questions, they can unmute them.
Specifically only to only about magnification and shutter speed and aperture. So the others will still get to will go in detail. Any questions, anyone?
I have a question. If you,
Sure.
yeah, okay. So this is regarding this aperture part. For example, if there is a spider, for example, for a macro photography, sitting on a particular branch, and my perspective is in line with the viewpoint of the spider, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in these kind of situation, what I have found out that when I'm putting single point focus in my DSLR and I'm even going to aperture f/16.
Mm-hmm.
If the focus is on the limbs of the spider, maybe the parts of the eye which is just behind, it goes
Correct.
out of focus, and the other way around. Even if I'm increasing it to around 20, 22 also, this problem always persists. So do you have any solution to this part apart from stacking?
So I think apart from stacking, there is no real solution for it. So one of the other things you could possibly try is shooting at a slightly lower magnification and then try cropping.
Okay.
So as the magnification gets lower, your depth of field also slightly increases.
Just to add on to this one, I've also tried to find out, because this is something very common. I've even spoke to many other mentors, those who have also suggested that stacking is maybe the only solution. I feel is okay, because there are some limitations to the gadgets we are using, and this is one of them. So in some of the videos which I have tried to find out about the solution, they are using some sliders and they are taking some continuous photographs to click with a slider, and then they are stacking it. So at that point of time, what happens, the stacking is much more perfect. Especially, for example, when you are taking a photograph of a flower, maybe on a tabletop, those sliders and all the arrangements when you are doing indoor is okay. Considering about the spider, taking a slider along with me and then setting it up outdoor, and then taking all the shots and then coming back to the spider. What is the tips you can give to me?
If you do not use a slider, try coming up with good hand-holding techniques in terms of staying very still. And as you shoot, just try finding out how your thing is and use your hand as a slider as low as possible. Right?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions? Just give me one moment while I just go ahead and try dialing in.
Results.
Yes, we'll come to that, saying exactly how we go ahead and
because
learn about removing information from Google, tap more info.
All right.
Hi, Hayat.
Yeah.
Hi, Hayat.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, Sheshgivi here.
Hi,
so,
Sheshgivi.
as you told to use external flash, I am into macro for more than 4 or 5 years. So I have a doubt, like, which curtain to use, like first curtain or second curtain, if you want to go for highest shutter speeds.
Sure. Can we have this a little while later, if you don't mind? A very short answer is use second curtain if you want to get in more of the ambient.
Okay.
Use first curtain if you want your flash and your normal exposure to define how what shows up.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
You haven't told me the shutter speed.
Sorry.
No, I want to know the optimum shutter speed for indoors when shooting a moth or a spider, whatever it is. I mean, which will be safe, and I'll be able to get the features. Minimum. Say 1/30th of a second.
Yeah, if you can handhold at 1/30th at about whatever 1:1 magnification, great. You've got amazing hands.
Yeah. I have shot even 1/15th of a second or 1/8th of a second, and it has worked well.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, just give me 1 second while I try sharing my. Okay, I'll probably just go ahead and stop this share. Do I have anything more? All right. Okay, any other questions while I set this up?
And if you can check the messages, there are a few questions.
No, I mean, very specific to this. The others will probably just review in a bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
Right. There's a pen mark. Can you remove it? I think that's gone now. Sure. So Paramesh, you said what are the challenges you face when shooting? We just went ahead and discussed that. Did you need anything more?
Yeah. What are the challenges nowadays?
Okay, so some of the challenges is again like the kind of available light, the kind of for the magnification I need. Do I have enough shutter speed and all of those?
No. In the at a time of shooting, there is lots of problem.
Correct. Yeah. So
I am not talking about any adjustments, any
sure.
Photography settings. I'm talking about the situation. How do you face the situation? What is the challenges you are facing?
Right. So one of the biggest challenges is not having the subject run away for me. Right. So that is one, and the second is the accessibility to the subject, the given conditions. That is one. So that is where you'll need to make field notes. I prefer to call it field craft. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you go ahead and learn on the field, saying how what works and all of that. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have different techniques to approach different subjects. You pick different timings to approach certain subjects. Yeah.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah. Then again, there also is the factor of safety. What are the kind of places you are shooting? So that is why, as much as I love shooting thing, but I also prefer having a group around. So there's also this safety factor which you need to factor in.
Excellent. That's what I am expecting. See, in the group shooting, what happens? See, anyone can identify what happening there.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That's important.
And again, I have one of my favorite quotes in terms of shooting and all that. Right. Sorry, not just shooting. Any team event or team activity, which says none of us is as great as all of us. Right. So with a team, you always have this factor of different people bringing in different perspectives, more sets of eyes, different kind of subjects. Each of them will have their own. So that comes in handy in the field. Yeah. All right. So just let me know if you guys are able to see my screen. All right. You should be able to see it now.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So here are some of the lenses which I shoot with. Right. So this is a 18 to 55 equivalent. So this, like we just talked about, this goes from an aperture of 3.5 to 5.6, right? And has a 37 mm front diameter, right? So this field of view, if I just quickly mount it onto the camera, just give me 1 second.
Arun, mute.
Right. So once I begin this, right? So let's see the. So this is the field of view I'm getting right now. Right? So this is at say 18. This is at say 55.
Could you please rotate the screen?
Oh, the screen? All right. Is this any better? Sorry.
Yeah, Hayat, here I think camera is in vertical position.
Okay,
Is
this
it
thing.
possible to make it horizontal?
I'm not sure how, because I didn't use the tripod head on this.
Okay, no problem. You please change your hands orientation.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Any better?
Yeah, this is perfect. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So here's where the view is, right? So this is at 18, and this is at say 55, right? So this is how your perspective changes as you change focal length. Correct? Sorry. All right. And say at 55 mm, I try focusing. Just 1 second. Let me change focus mode. Right. So it tries to focus, and it uses its own minimum focusing distance. Right. This is the maximum magnification I can get to. Yes. Right. So that's the maximum magnification I can get to. So there are certain ways of going ahead and changing this whole thing by using what we call as a extension tube. So what I'll do now is bring in this empty piece of connectivity between the lens and the body. So what this will do is reduce the minimum focusing distance, right? So imagine we did a very funny exercise earlier, right? Where all of you probably guys went squint, whoever tried, by focusing as close as possible. Yes, at some point, if you had the capability, or your eyes had the capability to go ahead and focus closer, do you think what your eye saw could see in greater detail? Right? The answer would be probably yes. Correct? So what we're trying to do is go ahead and reduce the minimum focusing distance of this particular lens now. Right? So now the same thing, let's probably try with this. Right? So I'm still at 55 mm. Just 1 second. Can you see that now?
And hold it slightly above head.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just change to manual focus and get it. Right? So you see the kind of detail that brings in now. It was the same lens.
Yeah, got it.
Right. So that's one of the ways you use extension tube. Right. And then coming to the actual thing where you have various different options. So that was one where you use an extension tube to go ahead and do it. And then the next option is using a telephoto lens. In this case, I'm using a mid telephoto equivalent of 55 to 200. And this is the kind of size I get on the lens. Like, see, it literally fits on the center of the palm, right? So what I can do now as an option is actually attach this thing called a Raynox diopter. Right? So this specialist lenses, which are dedicated macro. So this is the 1:1 macro, which means I can shoot a 17 mm subject. Yes. And then I also have a lava 2.5 to 5x, which extends from this all the way to this, right? At about 5x magnification, I am able to shoot how much? Anyone with an answer?
10x.
No. 10x equivalent to a thing, yes. What is the smallest subject size I can shoot?
3 millimeter or so.
Correct. So that is the kind of magnification I can shoot at, right? So these are the various options that you actually have, right? So then, just give me one moment, please. Yeah, sorry, back. And then comes this other option of using flash indoors, right? So when you're able to just go ahead and pop on a external flash, or maybe even your inbuilt flash, what it does is it gives you the much needed light to go ahead and shoot anything, right? So let's try doing that. Just give me one moment. Right. And my screen visible?
Yes.
Right. So let's say, for instance, this is the thing I want to shoot at, right? So if I go ahead and focus, some people, hey, why isn't this focusing? Why is it not focusing? Because there's not enough contrast. But the moment I point to an area which has contrast, it latches on. See that? And this is just that. See, on a flat surface which doesn't have much contrast, it will still hunt. But the moment you bring it to an area which has focus, which has enough contrast, what happens? It's able to latch on, right? And this is exactly how my first image looked like. It's not a glitch. Again, it's a blank screen. The moment now I turn on my flash, let's see what happens. Right? I still go ahead and focus. 185. Sorry, it was still recycling. Right. So this is the image I see. See, I'm even able to see how dusty it is. Yes. All right. And now you can see some very big problems, right? So the moment you use flash, the contrast in the image went through the roof. I have very blown brick highlights and deep shadows. Yes, so there are certain ways of working around this now. So what I intend to do now is I will go ahead and change what we call as the apparent light size. Right? So when the light source is small, like say for instance, if right now it's mid-noon, right, and the sun is really far, what will happen? Do you see pretty strong shadows when you walk outside? Likely yes. Sorry, I'm back now. All right, so now let's probably just go ahead and add. So this was the light source, right, of mine. which gave me like a light, which was pretty harsh, right? And as you see, the flash head is going to throw it out in an arc, or not an arc, a form of a V output, right? Which goes in all directions, but it's still harsh, and the light is going to be still uh, pretty contrasty. So what I intend to do with this is change the apparent light size. And bring in something like this, right? So now what this does is makes the apparent light size pretty large. So let's go ahead and retake the image which we had a while ago, right? It's the same thing, right? So now let's quickly review the image, right? So this versus this had pretty deep shadows. If you see some of this, not much of detail on the shadow, but here you can actually see the much greater detail. And if you also notice the marks, the white marks on the lens, they're not as blown out as the other. So that is how you should probably use flash for best effectivity. Yep. All right, so I'm just gonna, can you please rotate? Oh, sorry. So one of the questions was, isn't a good diffuser important for my good pictures? When you're using external flash, it definitely is. Guys, am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, but I can't see anything.
No, I'm just changing slides now. Just one.
Perfect.
All right. Let me just bring this up. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is one of my most loved thing I like to showcase. Yeah, so I find the insect or the arthropod world pretty fascinating, right? So I'll probably just quickly take you through a short journey of what the arthropod world brings and why I actually am so crazy about this whole thing. And in between, I'll pick a few shots to dissect how each image was. Now, I won't probably say each image, some of the key images were made. All right, so the insect life stages are in some different forms. So what you have the egg, which becomes a youngling, or in some forms they're called nymphs, where they go ahead and have different adult forms, which do not go through the pupal or a larval stage, are called the this is what the cycle is there. And then you go ahead, the nymph then transformed into an adult. And then you have a 4-stage one where the eggs, the larvae hatch out, the pupa, and then there is a final adult, right? And so we all notice this, right? So each stage has its own set of challenges for the insect kingdom, right? And so one of the ways they do to survive and thrive is by mass production of eggs, right? So in this case here, we have Pentatomidae eggs, which are wrapped completely around a stalk of grass. So we all take great pride, right, in terms of knowing we understand mathematics, we understand geometry. A simple bug has to understand what is the circumference or the girth of the stalk it has to pick to lay, and some of them lay a precise of 12 eggs at any point. Isn't that amazing? Right? Yeah. So in this case, yeah, here again we have some of my friends call this as the puski pataki or whatever we use during the Diwali, the smaller ones. So these look like that, but these are actually eggs of the assassin bug. So again, here I picked a depth of field which was enough just to highlight some of these and not all of it, because I wanted some separation from the background. So you see a progressive depth of case has already exited. So you can see the coloration, which is very different. So here's a two-striped jumping spider female guarding her set of eggs underneath a thin sheath of silk. Right. So again, we all spoke about how showcasing is necessary, connecting to an emotion is necessary, right? Motherhood, any of that sort is a pretty strong emotion for most humans. So here again, used some of that. Right. So we all go ahead and build fences around our houses, everything else. But here, I think this is a spider's egg. I'm not sure. It actually has used some spiky material from different plants to go ahead and make a fence sort to guard its eggs. Hi, Dirgesh Shah. I think, thank you. Yeah. All right. So here's another thing where there is a green link spider, a female guarding and carrying her egg sac along. So all the time that she's guarding this, she's not going to eat. Probably the only exception to that is if anything happens to go close enough for a grab, that's the only meal she'd have. Right. So here's a thing where you can notice not the same one, but a green link spider with her spiderlings in the background and a winged ant as a kill. Right. So if you wanted to have both the spiderlings as well as the primary subject in detail, we'll have to stack two images, one which is the background in focus and then this. Right. So coming on to the next thing, right? So again, here I use the quotient of color contrast to my advantage, where we have all the primary, if not disregarding the blue, but still you have a pretty strong contrast of yellow, whites, and reds. Right? These are Pentatomidae nymphs which have just hatched. So getting on to the next one, which is again these are bark lice, which were huddled together. So again, used a pretty flat point of view to get completely perpendicular, get a lot of texture, and then show some kind of an environmental thing saying what are the conditions they generally found in. So here they were found on a pretty the lichen heavy bark of a tree. So here you can see the Corridae or shield bug eggs, which have hatched. And these have this innate thing of hanging out together, at least for the first molt. So you can see the molts, the exoskeletons, before they actually moved on. So here's another classic case of building a fortress or a castle for yourself. So here's a moth pupa, which has gone ahead and made a pretty hairy, nest, nice looking nest. So I just spoke about how arthropods of all types, right? They have this outer bodysuit, if you want to call that. So imagine if you were Iron Man or Batman, right? So you go ahead and buy a suit for yourself, but you're growing. But what happens if you grow, or you, after, say for instance, these holidays, we aren't going to fit back into most of our clothes, right? So we'll end up going and buying new clothes. But for arthropods, that's not the case. They actually have a harder exoskeleton made of chitin, which they'll have to shed out of. So here is a process where the gaudy grasshopper is just molting its old exoskeleton. You can see that on the left here. So all these can evoke pretty good emotions or have a good connect with the viewer, right? So these have a lot of thing where there's metamorphosis, there's change, all of that thoughts are triggered in the mind. So here's again a different one of two dragonflies which have already emerged from the exuvia. This is the outer shell. So in this case, in terms of dragonflies and damselflies, they spend a lot of their majority of their life cycle underwater. And their subaerial life cycle is pretty short. So again, we just spoke about how emergence or molting happens. So in this case, on the left, we waited in the rainy forest of Agombe for about 2 to 2.5 hours to watch this. So imagine an insect of this length, right, which is still unfurling its wings, and it'll get longer. This was stuffed into a shell which is this small, probably about half its size. Pretty amazing, right? And on the right, you have a two-tailed spider with its old molt here, and it's still hanging out. It is letting itself die. And this is one of the most critical or delicate times of theirs, when they're very prone to predation. Right. So here's a curled up millipede. Anybody with an answer on what kind of composition this rule? I don't know. I broke a lot of composition techniques, but what does this follow? The golden spiral?
Golden.
Yeah. All right. So this, to the untrained eye, this will look exactly like a snail, but it isn't. This is a, anyone guessing?
Spider.
Spider.
Yeah, it's a spider. But that is only visible at this magnification, right? So it has these spots where it even mimics the droplets kind of a thing. It has the bird poop kind of a thing, and also the edges which make it look exactly like a snail. So pretty amazing. The kind of watching this in the field was pretty overwhelming for me. Right. So people who are passing by give me a lot of weird looks. I'm used to it by now. But here, some person actually stopped and asked, "Why are you taking a picture of a bark? Did I just take a picture of a bark, or do you guys see it?" So here, so here is not a spider, but here you actually see this is a bark mantis. You can see the eyes, the antennae, the folded legs, and the long abdomen. Right. So this is how these are various techniques you can use when you know there isn't enough background to make the subject stand out for a portrait. Yeah. So again, this was just a end of a stick or a broken twig, but this is actually a caterpillar. You can actually see the micro eyes on this. So this looked from far looks exactly like a. Any of you like going below trees in the evenings when you're walking? Have you had any blessings from above from the?
It looks like bird poop.
Yeah, this looks like a bird poop, right? So it's actually a lime butterfly caterpillar. Yeah. So this again, if you look at it from far, it looks like an ant, but it's not. It is a ant mimicking mantis. Sorry, just 1 second. Let me check how we're doing on time. I think we're fine. All right. And here's a ant mimicking spider. So this looks like an ant, but it isn't. So what gives it away is actually this long chelicerae and the number of legs. So most spiders have 8 eyes and 8 legs. So here's again, they use camouflage, and blending in with the environment. So here's a crab spider waiting for a unsuspecting bee or a fly to come by. And they also make the use of most of what their resources are. Anybody know what this is?
Beetle.
Yeah, but what? Dung beetle.
Dung
Yes.
beetle.
Dung beetle.
So I had to get pretty close to the dung to actually get the image, right? So when you're in the field, what you want to showcase, that will drive you towards whatever you have to do. Right. So now coming on to the bit which is you could use for showcasing, which is interdependence, right? We always think, oh, humans are social animals. Yes, we are. But insects also have various modes of engaging with each other to ensure they are living it right. So here we see weaver ants, which are pulling a leaf together. Then they go ahead and once the leaf is pulled together, some of them go fetch their pupae. For the pupa, they secrete silk, and that silk is used to tie down the leaves together, right? So if you actually notice here, right, so there is one manager who's on the left, who's not really doing much, but he's coordinating everything. And then you have an 1 ant width at the top, right, where this is probably 1 ant width, but this bottom portion definitely is more than 1 ant. Yes. So what actually is happening here is the ants hold on to the next ant's abdomen and form a chain. And they use this chain and their strength together to actually pull the leaf nearer. Yeah. So in this case, again, let's try dissecting this a little, right? Why the black background? Yes. So one of the things I did was, in this case, I used external flash and I wanted decent enough depth of field. So I had chosen at, say, about, I think, f11 or f13, if I recall right, and an ISO of 200, right? So if my flash did not fire at this setting, say ISO 200, 1 by 1/60th or 1 by 200, and aperture of, say, f13, under the shade, if I go ahead and take that shot, my image will go black, dark or black, based on how much ambient I'm seeing. Yes. But because I use flash, the reach of the flash is going to define what showed up in the image. So behind this, behind the leaves, there's probably something else, probably the garden or something which is visible. But because it doesn't have enough, it doesn't register on the final exposure. So here, the exposure was driven by my flash output and how far the flash was able to reach. Yeah. All right. So on to the next. So again, here are paper wasps. They nest in a pretty as a colony. So here they went go ahead and use plant matter and build paper-like structures, paper waxy structures to go ahead and build a nest. So here you can see crazy orange ants. One ant, there's no chance it's going to carry such a large thing. So they have this teamwork where they are able to carry a large owl fly. Right. So this is all of us, which the government is telling us against. They are not following social distancing, but here are pupae of a leaf beetle called Chrysomelidae. So these go ahead and this phenomenon is called cycloalexy, right? Where they go ahead and pupate together for strength in numbers. Amazing, right? Who would have thought? A beetle's pupa would have had so much brain to utilize all of these techniques. So here is a social spider web, which just went ahead and caught on a, any guesses what the prey is? A grasshopper.
Grasshopper.
Right. Yeah. So in this case, what I did is, if you notice, I don't have a black background because I knew I'm not shooting at a very high aperture, and I dragged my shutter speed down enough to bring in more of the background to show right? So, and I also bumped up my ISO to about ISO 400. So the same image, if I shoot by one mutualism, right? Where you have this plant, a tree hopper, a Membricidae, with the set of eggs it's guarding. And this is being guarded by weaver ants. You know why? Because they are crazy about the excretion of sugars from these guys. So for them, these are sugar farms. Guys, can everybody go on mute, please? Thank you. Yeah, so for them, these are sugar farms, and that's how they're guarded and cultured. All right, and so here, any guesses what this is?
Eggs.
Not
Pollen,
eggs.
flower
So,
pollen.
yeah, this is flower pollen. So this is what causes allergies to a lot of people, but is also necessary for plants to thrive. Right. This is their basic reproduction. Right. So talking of pollen, here's why bees are so necessary. You can actually see how loaded the face of this honeybee is, and they also have these special pockets on their thighs which collect pollen. And what happens when this bee goes to the next? That pollen has a chance to move to the next flower, pollinate. That's right. Yeah. So here you actually see these are sockets. I don't know what's the common name for that. So you can actually see there's a fishhook ant which is taking care of these. So they actually maintain several farms at different locations. Right. So with all of this, you would imagine insects would be a runaway hit that just overtake the whole population of everything and cause an imbalance. But no, there is a certain balance to the whole thing. So there's a natural control, there is predation, but in this case, you're actually seeing a wasp. So I in fact kid with all of my shooting buddies as well, where I say there is a wasp for every egg size, and I think that is actually true. So here you notice the other shield bug eggs which had hatched, the red ones, the red and white. So these are the eggs, but in this case, these aren't going to turn into any kind of that. You can actually see the patterns here inside, which suggest there is a wasp larvae eating out the contents. And here is a wasp, like a cuckoo, unlike a cuckoo, it just doesn't lay and run away. It is actually guarding the egg set. Yeah. So this is what they'll turn out to be. You can actually see. So on top, if there's a normal hatch, you'll see these hatchets open like a lid. But in this case, you can actually see some of the wasps just peeping out and by making holes, and that is the exit hole they come out of. So everything is not hunky-dory in the natural world. And then once the wasps are done, they also, some of the wasps prefer much more lively or moving around or juicier hosts for them. So what happened here was this was a caterpillar, a moth caterpillar, on which the wasp laid eggs inside the body. The larvae have actually hatched out and are feeding on the body here. You can actually see that. The green grape-like things you see are wasp larvae. And then there's the old normal predation. In this case, green-link spider taking down a winged termite. So these are the winged termites you see when after rains, which are attracted to light. So here's a robber fly with a, any idea what the prey is? Not a robber fly, but this is some kind of a long-legged fly.
What was the shooting combination?
Sorry?
Combination means how did you take this photo?
So this was So here you see a Hillis jumping spider preying on katydid, and teamwork with the weaver ants carrying back, I think, some kind of a pupil case or something. Right. So since we are really running short of time, I think I'll just probably quickly jump in on a quick guess game of what it is. Any guesses what this is? A mosquito larva.
Mosquito larva.
A mosquito larva. So you can imagine, yeah, you can see, so you can see how fascinating in terms of how its propulsion gear is, right? All the fine hair and the tail it wriggles, right? So this, if anybody of you have a ThinkPad or a thing, the ThinkPad has a mouse tracker, the red button. So this is a high magnification close-up of that. So this should give you some window into what all really can constitute a macro image and how this could work, right? So literally anything and everything around you becomes very interesting. Out of the laptop screen.
So the butterfly one, is the butterfly still alive when you took it, or it was dead?
No, this was a dead specimen which I found below a spider's web.
Okay.
Yeah, so this again brings in a very important point, right? So it's always good to have magnification, but never at the cost of harming a subject, right? What you want to showcase is a subject, and the subject should be, you're trying to showcase the beauty of a subject, and with that you shouldn't actually end up left fruits or something overnight.
Yeah, I think it's a housefly.
Fruit fly.
It's a fruit fly.
Fruit fly.
Where do we have to make breakfast and eat?
Just give me one moment, guys. Yeah, so we all know we might have left fruits which might have gone a little overripe, and soon you'll see these tiny little flies hovering around, right? So that is called a fruit fly, and this is what the eye of that looks like. So you can imagine this is like close to 10x or a little above. And on the top right, a fingerprint layout of my of my left index finger, and on the bottom right we have a any guesses? Yeah, pencil lead. Pencil lead, yes.
What was that?
Pencil lead.
Oh,
the graphite, the graphite end.
Got it.
Right? Yeah. On the left, any guesses?
Mold.
A mold of a mantis.
Exoskeleton.
The exoskeleton of a praying mantis. In the middle, we have the wing structure.
Wing.
So these are the butterfly wing. And on the right, bagworm moth caterpillar. So this is what so imagine an insect has so much of a brain and the ability to go ahead and build that kind of a complex structure, which has a tapering end. So it has to know narrow at the top and larger as it goes at the bottom. Right. So this
Sugar crystals.
this is
Sugar
actually
crystals.
the fine sugar that we eat. And here's the eye layout of a cicada. So you can actually see on the left side is the actual eye, and on these three, these are called ocelli or false eyes, or rather much more basic eyes is what I'd say, not rather false eyes. Yeah. So that brings us, I think, to the end of this. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Yeah, I have one question. I'm Siddharth speaking here.
Sure. Hi, Siddharth.
Yeah, so I just wanted to understand. So we understand flash diffusion, like you explained.
Right.
But generally, what is the way you point the flash? Do you point it directly to your subject or over your subject, or do you experiment based on however you want it to be pictured?
So it depends on a lot of different factors, right? So direct flash often will result in pretty harsh shadows or everything else, right? So, and also some of the textures will show better when there is angular light instead of frontal light. Textures, colors, like say for instance, the wing of a cicada or a pattern on a beetle shell.
This is Prashant. I have a question.
Yeah, hi.
Do you ever manage to take any video of these macro size images? Like, I'm more interested in videography rather than photos.
Sure, that is a viable option. So again, there are multiple options. So you'll need a dedicated macro lens. One, the primary reason being, it will give you better working distance than any of the other options which we spoke about. Like say for an extension tube or a reversal of a lens.
Okay, and how good will be the autofocus speed and precision on these minute objects?
So you can imagine, right? So based on the size, I most of the times when I get to beyond 1:2 kind of magnification, I will always rely on manual focus. But at lower ones, you can probably define which is a good area which has good enough contrast, and then use that for
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Narayan.
Hi, Narayan. I think it'll be easier for you to picture. Okay, so imagine you are at say 1 meter from a light source which has constant output.
Okay.
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 You are at 1 meter. You go ahead and take a shot. Yes. Okay. You will have a certain amount of exposure to it.
Okay.
Yes. If you increase that to 2 meters, you would imagine I am reducing the light or exposure intensity by half.
Okay.
But in fact, you will be getting quarter of the light, not half of the light.
Oh, okay.
So similarly, when you apply it to focus, as you go ahead and decrease your working distance to the subject, the depth of field will start reducing exponentially, right? So where if you cut down your distance by half, your depth of field will reduce by 1/4. Sorry, will reduce to 1/4. Sorry, let me correct that. Reduce to 1/4 of what it was originally.
Okay, Ramesh here.
Yeah.
What dedicated macro lens do you use on your Olympus?
So on my Olympus, I use the Olympus 60mm macro. And at times when I need more magnification, I will go ahead and add on a extension tube as well as a Raynox DCR 250.
Yeah.
Yeah. thing, right? And it also is long enough to cover the distance between the flash head and the lens tip.
Yeah.
So the idea is to bring the light as close to the lens tip as possible.
Okay.
And cover the subject as much as that, right? So
No,
that forms the major snoot or redirection of light, right? And then comes to the front part. So front, it varies a great deal, right? So some of us use packing foam.
Okay.
So packing foam is a great diffusion source.
Okay. So thickness it doesn't matter.
Depending on thickness, we can.
Okay.
You can change, and what is also a good thing is tracing paper.
Okay.
Right, varying thicknesses, or you can even layer it in different things, right? So the structure of your diffuser, if it's long enough, like say a parcel container, it'll be pretty broad, right?
Okay.
So in that you can have layered. At one layer you can have one, and at the output you can have two.
Yeah. Okay. Now I am using a Godog's this one diffuser in the front, but in the front, whatever you told now, I have to just try that.
Yeah, you can probably try that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many of these commercial things, they aren't specialized enough for true macro photography. You'll soon learn.
Yeah.
What they end up doing is they cut down more light than they actually diffuse.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm Vedant.
Yeah, hi, Vedant.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One is when you're using extension tube, which is an empty tube, are you not endangering your sensor by dust? That is first question. And secondly, when you are using a diffuser, especially when the angle, somebody had asked the angle of fall of light, is it different for insects, beetles, according to your subjects, whether that angle differs when you use a diffuser?
Sure. Okay, all right. I'll go ahead and start that. All right.
Yeah.
So one is the first question of yours was, are you endangering your sensor, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The moment you open up your sensor in the field, there is a possibility that because the sensor is statically charged most of the times, and that is why I always advise turn off your camera as much as possible before changing lenses.
Okay.
Because when it is on, it is statically charged and it will attract more than when it is switched off. Even off, it has that tendency anyway. So what it does is try changing, not changing in the field, or have some kind of a box or something which you put your lens and body in, and try changing it there, so that attraction is, the possibility is slightly low. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Second question.
And the second question was, could you probably just remind me what it was?
When you are using an external diffuser.
Yeah, right. The angle of light.
Yeah, angle of light.
Yeah. Yes. So there are multiple things to it, right? So one is the one I showed you is a pretty flat diffuser, right? Where I want a pretty flat light. But when I want multi-directional light.
Yes.
For light to be around. So at that time, what we use is a concave design diffuser.
Yes.
Right, which sort of engulfs the whole subject from from at least 3 different directions.
Yes.
Right, and then we use a combination of either a single or a multiple flash setup.
Yeah.
Right, so that really will define how your diffusion will look like. What is the kind of iridescence if you want to showcase all of those.
Can I have one more question, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a Canon and Olympus both user. I have a Canon. I'm using a Beetle diffuser for my Canon setup. But this Olympus and 60 mm macro, it's a very tiny.
Correct.
Very tiny. So do you have any Indian or okay, thank you.
Quickly run through the chat.
Hi,
yeah, hi.
Hello. My one question from my side. I'm a sailor from Pune.
Hi.
Which is the best lens? This is 30 mm or 60 mm?
Okay. So one
I'm not
is
a micro photographer.
sorry.
I am not a photographer, but I am selling the lenses.
Okay.
So which
All
is
right.
the best lens for micro photography? 60 mm or 30 mm? What is the technical difference?
Okay. So the major difference is as your focal length of the macro lens decreases, changes, so does the working distance. Right.
So what is the distance for the 30 mm and 60 mm?
So for a 30 mm, I'm not sure the exact spec, but it's going to be a lot lesser. To get a 1:1 magnification, you'll have to get a lot closer to the subject compared to a 60 mm. Yes.
Because many people, they ask only for 30 mm. Why that is so?
Correct. See, the 30 mm is also closer to the natural field of view of what most people are used to, right? And this is another point I wanted to bring up, is many of them sit on the fence saying, do I really need a macro lens or not, right? A true macro lens will also give you will double up as a great portrait lens because they're pretty sharp and have good bokeh most of the times.
Yes, thank you very much.
Right. So 30 mm, that way, I think if people still want to shoot, are not going specifically for a macro thing and still want a walk around lens with good capabilities, I think the 30 mm that way is much tuned to as a good overall performer.
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, Hayat. How are you? This is Krishna.
Yeah, Krishna.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. This actually, I feel, this full frame sensor will give more depth of field compared with the smaller sensor or micro four.
Sure.
But, many times I have seen when I took full frame macros and, when I compare with your 4/3, your depth of field without staking, it's giving a fantastic results.
Correct.
What makes it the difference? What is the compression? Do you your Olympus 60 mm and this body Olympus OMD 10 is making some compressions or something behind that?
Sure. All right. So I'll answer this in two parts, right?
Yeah.
So one is the actual thing of how your magnification, the sensor bokeh or the depth of field works.
Yeah.
So the way you're presenting it is, I think, slightly inverse. So on a full frame, you will get more bokeh and lesser depth of field.
Yes, you're right.
On a micro 4/3, I'm going to possibly get lesser bokeh and greater depth of field because the sensor is smaller and it'll take much lesser to actually give me that kind of perceived, I call it that particular word because it's not exact technical depth of field, perceived depth of field. The sharpness or the slab of focus is going to be slightly higher on a micro 4/3.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So did I answer that?
No, this Olympus is doing some compression when we take the photograph.
So no, one is, there are two things to it. One is the smaller sensor, right?
Okay.
So let's take the example of your mobile phone.
Okay.
Yes. So a mobile phone is a fixed focal length, fixed focal length, fixed aperture at say about f2.
Yeah.
But when you take a landscape image at f2, what happens? Almost everything is in focus.
Yeah, everything is focused from infinity.
Correct. So the reason for that is your smaller sensor. Because you have a smaller sensor, you will get a greater perceived depth of field.
Okay. Right.
And also because it is a 60 mm macro and not a 90 or a 180.
Okay.
There is some bit of compression also involved. So that way, with the same logic, if I have subjects which are cooperative enough, if I go on a 30 mm macro lens compared to my 60, I will get better depth of field.
Yes, I have
checked. Not bokeh, but a depth of field for the focus lab.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I used both, 30, 60, 90, everything. But, what you said is right. 30, we have a more depth of field.
Yes.
Compared with other things. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
That is where the compression comes
Yeah.
in.
Okay. Right.
Hi Hayat, sorry to interrupt you. So as we all aware, we have a quiz, small quiz at the end of the session.
Sure.
So once this Q&A done, we will start that. So the
Done.
process is already, so we already shared the process for that. So if anybody is required some help, they can they can just text some message in the chat box. So we'll just answer that.
Sure. All right. So somebody had also posted a question saying what was the flash that I'd used. The one I used here was the Godox TT350O.
Hi, Hayat. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, your pictures are awesome.
Thank
And you have really got pictures of very unique creatures. I mean, I have seen for the first time. I take macro photos and I'm doing since 2 years. I mean, I'm okay. I'm not so great photographer. But I wanted to know about the behavior. How can I get the knowledge about them?
Sure. Books are, I think, a great source, no doubt. But in today's world of instant gratification, that's the route I took, where I went and joined the entomology, Insects of India, and Spiders of India
Okay.
Facebook groups. So I think
Okay.
there are enough that provides a great platform for bringing enthusiasts like us with
Okay.
scientific folks as well. I think
Okay.
so. I think we should make use of that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I had one question from Unique. Sorry. Do you use an external focus light, and is this always switched on and diffused or not?
So is the question about do I use a focusing slider?
No, a focus light for have more light for the focusing before the flash.
Right. Yeah. So thankfully, because of the electronic viewfinder, there is enough screen boost, right? So most of the times, if it's not too dark, I am able to still view enough through the electronic viewfinder. So I don't use an external light source other than if it is at sundown or beyond. At that time, I have friends who hold a torch for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah.
Focus bracketing mode, and you tell how many steps are needed. You define what is the start, what is the end, and you focus to the closest possible distance. And then from there on, it will change the focus point and keep shooting.
Yeah.
Right. And then based on your model, it might be able to put all of these together and give you a stacked image.
Yeah.
Whereas in some other models, you'll still get different images of splices of focus.
Yeah. You have to do it later in post processing. Yeah.
Correct. And then compared to your other thing of whether it is better to go this way or do manual focusing, again, that is left to technique and based on the kind of what contrast that exists on the DM, I'll help you onto those profiles.
Hi, Praveen here from Hyderabad.
Hi.
It's been very nice attending your session. So just want to know what is the basic gear needed to start with macro photography, apart from mobiles, what you just said. So what is the cameras and the lenses, the basic like 60 mm, and is it a mirrorless is better or DSLR is better? So can you please shed a light on that? And
so again,
flash, diffusers, everything, the basic kit.
See again, basic kit will differ a lot on how deep your pocket is, right, and how much you want to be really spending and all of that. So see, even personally, I've done a lot of macro work without true macro equipment, right, with reversed old lenses, which have manual aperture rings. If you are able to go ahead and just reverse those onto your cameras, that can give you pretty decent results as well, but will have pretty limited working distances, right?
Right.
So as a starting kit for the Olympus, I would definitely suggest either a 30 or a 60 mm macro lens with a mirrorless body of any sort. So I'll tell you two reasons why I prefer mirrorless over this. So we just discuss some of it, right? One is in terms of accessibility. You can use this tilt screen of the thing to put out your hand and still take an image, where the whole body might not be able to fit if you had the DSLR system up to your eye. It gives you a lot of flexibility.
Okay, hi, Lucky here.
Hi, Lucky.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm great. So I have a very simple question for you. I mean, I've been always walking with the 60 mm so far. I just love it, and I would like to know what is the sweet spot for this lens. I am still not able to figure it out.
I think it's pretty sharp, right from wide open till I say about f11 on a bare lens. But
Okay.
I think with Raynox, I generally go up to about f13, f14.
Okay, so I was working with I think f16, and I could see a little of bit of diffraction.
Yeah. Because see, despite it being a micro four third, it cannot do away with any of the optical physics.
Exactly.
Right. So I think if you're using a bare lens, I would not recommend going beyond f11 or f13.
And I have one more question. I mean, I went to Funsur last year, and then it was my first time with the Olympus body with the for a night trail, and I had a trouble. I mean, not me, but the camera was having a tough time figuring out the focusing points. Single point focus was quite. I mean, was not able to hunt during the night time. It was, I mean, pitch dark. I agree. It's difficult for anybody, obviously.
Sure.
But then, how do you? I mean, coming from this point, how do you shoot snakes during the nighttime or any amphibian? I mean, if you are, I mean, the subject is too big and quite far from the lens, and how do you help yourself getting this in focus?
So in that case, your light source will matter a great deal, right? So if you have a torch, and that will give you, and that is at the right point on the snake or the frog, that will give you enough contrast for the autofocus to look.
Right. Do you change the diffuser for this? I mean, for these subjects, because I don't think the normal diffuser which we are using for small subjects like mantis or something like this,
right?
It should be a different one, right? Or are we using the same one?
Depends on a lot of factors. So one is how much distance I have between that and this, and at times I'll also use I'll dial in a much more extra flash exposure compensation, or increase the flash output if I'm in manual. So that will ensure the light is reaching a little more beyond than just the range that I need.
I believe you're using a 350, Godox 350, right? 350L.
Correct.
Nice. So is it? I mean, is it strong enough to go? I mean, the guide number is pretty low.
Yes. So again, then your guide number will come into picture. You'll need to play around with your ISO sensitivity.
Actually, I'm also having a KX100, the twin flash. But the basic issue is very sharp shadows and bright highlights, and that is why I'm actually going back again to the single flash, going to the basic. So I think for the subjects which I have been asking for, like snakes and frogs, maybe, then I think.
Lucky, you just stopped in between.
Hello. So
Yeah.
where was I? I mean, I don't know when it stopped. I'm sorry. So I also have a twin flash which I'm using. I've stopped using and I go back to the basic of using a single flash, that is Bodoc 350. And I believe for small subjects 350 is better, and then for night trails or for a subject which is of a bigger size, I think twin flash will be better option because of a better guide number. And KX100 also have a assisting flashlight. So
sure. Yeah, that will definitely help. Yeah, no doubt.
So that will be all from my side. Thank you so much, here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So do we have any further questions? Because I think Sai and team have some surprises up for you via a quiz. Maybe we can run through that. Sai, how do you want to take this?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your contribution. And so we'll have a small question answer or quiz session. So Raghav will share the ID with you, ID and password. You just need to download the app called Kahoot, wherein you can answer these questions. Raghav, please start this quiz. So this is the game pin. You should enter in your Kahoot app. Sai, can we start? You can explain. Hope it is clear to everyone. If there is any doubt, please ask. So here is the third question.
Closer to the subject, what happens to the depth of field? So the first option is increase, second is decrease, third is remain same, and fourth is all of them. So as you get closer to the subject, what happens to the depth of field? So the first option is increase, second is decrease, third remain same, or fourth is all of them. So still Lucky Jaiswal is on top. So still Lucky Jaiswal on top. Second place CS. Third is H2 macro. Someone is there. So let's be move to question number. So next question is question number 6. So the question is, if you have a 21 mm sensor and shot at 1:1 magnification, what is the size of subject that can fill the frame? So I repeat question again. If you have a 21 mm sensor and shoot at 1:1 magnification, what is the size of subject that can fill this frame? The option is 35 mm, 21 mm, 17 mm, 120 mm. There's fourth option: 35 mm, 21 mm, 17 mm. Yeah.
Again, Lucky Jaiswal is on top. rubidium, H2O micro. These three leading and board. Next question. It's a last question. How do you increase the area of focus without compressing on image sharpness? There are two options: focus taking and magnification. Focus taking. So let's see who's on top three. Third is Divang Shetty. Second is Lucky Jaiswal. First is Subramanian. And runner-up is
Hey,
H2O
congratulations.
Micro. Yeah. Yeah, Sai.
Sai sir, Parthiv is there, so we can announce that also.
I'm just sharing my screen.
One more thing, we'll be publishing the whoever came first in the quiz will be publishing their names in the in our social media page. So please give your full name to what your name is in H2 macro and all.
Sir, should I share my screen because I have?
Yeah. You can do that, please.
Yeah. So I'm just sharing my screen. Just a minute. Yeah, just a minute. Yes, sir. Now I think this is on live. Yeah.
So Parthiv, you to in here and talk something about this.
Yeah, hi. So we should appeal the people as we are the influencer. We are the minority of the community, and the majority follows us. So I think if the minority appeals to the majority that this is a cause and we should appeal and for the donations. So I think everybody will donate. So this is when, with the artists as a community, should get together for one single cause. So this is the whole idea of the Artists for a Cause. And this year we are working with Akshay Patra Foundation, which is like known for feeding people and feeding children. So yeah, this is the main thing. Hello.
Yeah, Parthiv, please carry on because everybody on mute.
So okay, no problem. So this is the main cause. So I appeal everybody. So please contribute whatever you can. It will make a difference.
Yep, definitely great cause.
Yeah. If anybody has any questions, they can ask me about it. Yeah. So they can visit the website. It's artistforcause.in.
So the slide is visible for everyone, right?
Yes, we are able to see the website.
Yes, and also we will share to the context.
Yeah, because even a single person, even like whatever amount, whatever it benefits, like, the least we can do sitting at our home is money. Like, we can contribute money to the people because it's not possible to go out and help for anybody.
Cool. So what we can do is, Parthiv, here we will share this info on our social media as well.
Yeah,
and we will share this to all our photography contacts and our
yeah, because this money is directly going to the NGO. And I think if the, like I really feel that we should work on the micro level instead of the one macro. That's what I think. Everybody has a different ideology on that. But I think that, contributing your fund, dividing your fund into the micro level and into small NGOs, not even Akshay Patra, you find somebody, it's a small vendor, anybody else contributed there. Like, let these people can reach, like houses. All the NGOs can reach houses, but all the major people, they are just, distributing the, I don't know that I think like that way, but probably it's different everywhere.
And really enjoyed your macro photography.
Thank you for the opportunity as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. We would love to have more sessions like these in the coming future from you. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Yeah, it was good fun. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining
Stay
us.
safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Haya.
All the
Thank
best.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Creative, and thanks, Edson.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.